Live service games. The term has become synonymous with modern gaming, and you can find this type of game pretty much anywhere, and I don't think they're necessarily bad. But I do think that this form of content specifically has a shelf life, which is something that it actively tries to prevent. There are loads of examples of this in ways that do and don't work. Games like COD or Overwatch debatably see some benefit from this model. But there are definitely games that have just been buried because people don't want to put in the effort to learn 70 different operators, heroes, or get caught up on 6 years of story content just to know what the hell is going on. Sometimes these games do have such a charm to them that it really sucks to see they've been sucked into the I don't want to deal with all of it rabbit hole. Destiny 2 only has 5 expansions to buy: Witch Queen, Beyond Light, Lightfall, and The Final Shape, and the free-to-play content is definitely there. Locking content behind a paywall like this is an arguably okay decision for a game that has been in service for as long as Destiny 2 has, and it has to keep itself supported somehow after all this time. And selling other dungeon keys and cosmetics has helped keep the game afloat, as well as the CEO's crippling addiction to classic cars. Trying to get anyone into Destiny 2 who isn't already into it is nigh impossible without scrounging G2A or Kingwin to find cheap DLC passes. You can actually play the game for longer than 2 hours. The initial price tag, full price for all of Destiny 2's content, is $70 on top of another $70, so $140, which is about the price of one season of Call of Duty. It's not cheap to get into, and the only way you can really decide if you're going to enjoy the gameplay is to actually play it. Luckily, you can just play it for 2 hours and decide if it's worth it, right? No. Not only does Destiny 2 have a $150 entry fee for everything, it's also a gargantuan time sink that supplies plenty for you to do once. Once you've beaten that content, you reach the second wall, having friends to do the high-end content with. Luckily, the Destiny community is always willing to help out on the LFG forums or Discord server, and they can teach you all the nuanced mechanics and keep up with your substandard DPS loadout because you're raiding with the World Drop Palmyra B with Chill Grip and Field Prep on it. Destiny 2 isn't all bad though. I have so many amazing memories of late night raids with my friends, playing for hours and getting ready to try and beat the newest content all on our own. Its gunplay is rivaled by no other, and coupled with amazing graphics, animations, and sound design, it's a game I don't ever think I'll truly be able to leave behind. That being said, Destiny suffers from the dreaded weekly challenges system that plagues us all, and makes us sink so much time into doing random, seemingly mundane challenges for gear that's just a little bit better than the other stuff I've been using for a month. Even with all of this coupled together, I still love Destiny, and I look forward to our 1 month spurt every so often. It's something I don't think I'll ever be able to truly shake. Speaking of spaceman shooty-dooty games, Warframe is another one of those that suffers a lot of problems to Destiny, and that's that new players don't know what the fuck's going on. This game's new player experience is just god-awful. If I didn't have friends that had already been into the game before to help me out and figure out what characters I do and don't like, I wouldn't have ever touched the damn thing. Long and confusing fetch quests looking for specific items, coupled with just as many frames thrown in as middle-aged white dudes have Nickelback albums, makes the game an absolute nightmare for me to try and dip my toesies in. There's a lot of cool variety between frames for sure, and each one plays its own playstyle well and is interesting. I've been enjoying the fire frame for a while now, and it's very satisfying to just run around, mock piss, and leave fire just everywhere. That being said, there are upgrade cards I don't fully understand, as well as weapons being a part of the game, I think. I haven't played as much Warframe as I have with Destiny 2, obviously, and I'm sure that people have had similar experiences there. But goddamn, there's just a lot of shit my monkey brain simply cannot comprehend. I'm a Call of Duty player. They release a new OP gun, I buy the bundle. It's a simple transaction. You wanna know what isn't simple? Oh boy! For Honor is a Ubisoft title. It was released in early 2017, and it's a third-person fighting game where knights, Vikings, and samurai fight over territory in the fictional land of Heathmoor. It features a full 3-part campaign for you to play through, with each part of it focusing on one of the groups I listed before. The real kicker, however, is the multiplayer. You can fight 1v1s, 2v2s, or 4v4s in several different game modes with different rule sets for each one. Luckily for you, there's no reason to be playing anything other than Dominion, Breach, Duels, or Brawls because that's all the existing player base actually plays. This isn't necessarily their fault, as they're the best of the existing game modes. The main issue with For Honor is the existing player base has been playing the game since it came out in 2017, which makes it exceedingly hard to find matches of players of similar skill levels. Trying to introduce my friends to this game that I've been playing for years is almost impossible because of the simple fact that they get put into lobbies based on my MMR and not theirs. Skill-based matchmaking is another problem entirely, but it does have its place within this game in my opinion. This, coupled with all the nuanced mechanics and the unhelpful tutorial, means the best way to learn is to lose, which isn't fun. I know that heavy attacks can be feinted and guard broken at the start of the attack, and deflecting with Orochi is a light input and not a heavy, and how certain characters get top heavies off a guard break and yada yada, but all this poor bastard knows is, oh my god, what is happening, why is he moving so fast? But in reality, it's just a basic combo. I think it suffers from a lot of similar issues that all fighting games suffer from, including Smash Brothers, but obviously not as big of an issue. That being said, nothing is more annoying than sitting around playing Smash Brothers with friends at a party or something, and some fucking nerd comes in, takes 5 minutes to set up his custom control scheme, and then proceeds to just stomp on everyone with the same character they've been using for 4 years. This is the exact same thing that happens in For Honor or any fighting game really. The learning curve is just so incredibly steep that if it doesn't have a casual environment to support it, it dies. Nintendo spent so much time specifically making sure that Smash Bros. Didn't have large company-supported competitive scenes until much later in the game's lifecycle. But even then, it's a game that's just as easy to pick up and play. For Honor doesn't have that luxury. I mean, look at all the different moves in Smash. There's 2 buttons dedicated to jumping. For Honor has different combinations of different buttons that do different moves on different characters, on top of having different properties on different attacks at different times on different characters' chains. These attacks must all be dealt with in one of 4 or technically 5 ways, in 3 different directions: blocking, parrying, dodging, interrupting, or deflecting. These methods are not interchangeable and won't be useful in every scenario. I'll list them all out and show you what they all look like. There are light attacks, heavy attacks, zones, and bashes that can be undodgeable, unblockable, or have hyper armor depending on the character and where you're at in your chain. These all have different indicators and must be dealt with in different ways. Some are self-explanatory, some aren't. Obviously, undodgeable attacks cannot be dodged and must be blocked, parried, or deflected. Unblockable attacks can't be blocked or deflected and must be parried or dodged. Hyper armor is the weird one, and this just means the attack can't be interrupted. This also has some interactions with certain deflects, as they'll just bounce off. Bashes can't be blocked, parried, or deflected, as they have no directional indicator and must be dodged. This isn't even mentioning the fact that certain attacks can be feinted, meaning they get cancelled. This also isn't mentioning guard breaking, which is another mechanic entirely. This isn't a For Honor Crash Course video, so I won't go into detail about every mechanic in the game. The point is, if I can easily explain the way to play the game, then most new players are going to be largely uninterested. Games like Overwatch handle this by having more basic characters in each role, think Reinhardt, Soldier, Baptiste, etc. for newer players, and have much more nuanced characters, such as like Doomfist, Ball, Echo, or Lucio for more experienced ones. These more intensive characters aren't necessarily better than the easier ones either, which is a key difference. This allows players to be eased into the game and get used to everything without needing to learn a Doomfist rollout that requires you to know every Doomfist tech in the game. You can just pick Soldier and play Call of Duty. Obviously, knowing how to play high ground well and target priority differentiates a good and bad Soldier player. For Honor just struggles with this problem heavily compared to other games. Even Destiny 2 still has mechanics that players can grasp and be familiar with without needing to read an entire fucking novel to understand how to attack. I've tried so many times to get my friends into this game, and they simply just don't have any fun because there's so much to understand in such a short time. This is such a massive turnoff to players. Overly complicated systems do not mean your system is intricate. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the second time, also majorly struggled with this issue when it came to weapon progressing. Players absolutely despise this model of weapon progression. Let's just say you want to use this game's MP5, the Lockman sub. Simple, it's an iconic weapon with a lot of franchise history, plus that famous HK slap. Why wouldn't you want to use it? What the actual fuck is this? Players don't like being forced to use certain weapons, looking at you Destiny, please give me a poppable hand cannons back, just to be able to use the guns they want. Putting these behind natural progression is fine, because it makes sense and feels rewarding to accomplish. This just feels like a chore list I need to get done before my mom gets home. Some weapon manufacturers, which is legitimately how weapons are grouped, aren't as bad as others, but some are just really bad. This doesn't make players want to play longer, it just feels overly complicated and restrictive. You aren't even changing gameplay with this. If anything, you're actively making it worse by forcing players to use weapons they don't want to use. We'll look at another weapon manufacturer platform that shows this pretty well. Instead of putting these guns behind natural leveling, I now have to spend hours upon hours of in-game time using weapons I don't want to use in modes I don't want to use them in, just to get the PP Bison, because I think its name's funny. This is overly complicated and just not enjoyable to players. This game also introduced weapon tuning, which is a way for you to get the most out of your attachments by quote tuning them to enhance or reduce specific stats. Now, I don't totally hate this system, giving players control over their attachments is pretty sweet. That being said, COD players are stupid and will just use the same tuning on the same attachments that the first overly saturated YouTube thumbnail tells them to use. Adding depth to your gameplay isn't bad. Tons of games have intricate mechanics or progression systems that are easy to understand and utilize. Look at Baldur's Gate 3. Tons is going on in that game, yet tons and tons of people still enjoy it. Even Souls-like games have this going on. Simple mechanics lead to enjoyable gameplay, if you find getting your cock smashed by a hammer enjoyable. Something about Ubisoft games and just not being fun to start playing. Rainbow Six is a game that doesn't have 60 bajillion mechanics to learn to get into. There's just so many nooks and crannies and niches to be able to get any amount of competitive edge that if you don't know, you'll be put at a serious disadvantage. Knowing what walls go where, what operators have what guns, etc. I genuinely tried to get into this game, but I just couldn't. Getting used to different operators and different gadgets and different equipment and so many different angles and walls and cameras to know about that existing players are just already aware of. It's this and the skill ceiling of the game being just absurdly high. I'm going to shove Rocket League in here too, as I feel like it suffers from a somewhat similar issue where the mechanical skill ceiling is really high, which isn't bad, but it does make it difficult to introduce your friends to the game. No one wants to be convinced to play a game with their friend, just to have to practice in order to play with said friend. There are so many examples of games that have a skill ceiling that you can still be easily introduced into. Overwatch, COD, Valorant, Counter-Strike, so many games that you can play with friends without needing to hold a tutorial session, which is an actual thing I've done with For Honor, which in my opinion is just a little bit absurd. With the Witch Queen DLC for Destiny 2, they introduced a new mechanic called crafting. Destiny 2 is first and foremost a PvE looter shooter. Weapons drop with the randomly rolled 2 perks, not counting the barrel in the magazine, from a predetermined loot pool. Sometimes these perks are insanely good and complement each other amazingly. Real gamers know what I mean when I say that my ambitious assassin chain reaction forbearance hasn't left my hands since I got it. Crafting has had some generally positive reception on its release, with players being happy that they didn't have to chase down the god roll for the new weapon they want, especially with raid weapons being only available from specific encounters once a week. This is a massive turnoff for casual players who may not have a group to raid with every week or simply don't have the time. Enter red border weapons. Getting 5 of these, quote, deep sight weapons unlocks the pattern for that specific weapon. After crafting said weapon, you need to level it up to unlock all the perks for it. You can then choose which perks you'd like on it, even offering enhanced weapon perks at higher levels. This is far from a bad thing to implement, not removing the chase for players that enjoy it while offering a way to acquire the role they want for players who don't. The problem arises is when red borders The problem arises when red borders become limited and the crafting pool is already pretty big, with the new seasonal weapons being craftable on release or just generally unfun to farm because the seasonal activities lack variety. The best part is we already solved this problem with weapon focusing in the onslaught activities, guaranteeing a drop of that specific weapon on top of the drops you'll already get. This is pretty sweet. It gives a nice medium to both sides while not making the game feel like a total checklist. Now that we've talked about examples, this is basically what I've been trying to say this whole time. Games don't need to be complicated to be good, especially multiplayer titles. Good simplicity will always come across better than bad complexity. Look at cosmetics in Call of Duty. This topic's been talked about to death, and one of my friends made a great video on it already. You should totally go and watch that for a deeper dive on the whole subject. So many old games still hold up to this day because they're simple and well done. Counter-Strike is as old as I am, and I still play that game, and have friends that do as well. Gaming has become such a more is better style of market that it feels the need to constantly one-up itself, and this circles back to the title. Long-lived live service games suck ass. They're constantly updating and changing things that don't need to be changed, fighting power creep by releasing something, realizing it's busted as piss, and then nerfing it into the floor, and then dropping something again next week. I don't have an issue with adding content to a game post-release. It can be a good thing and keep the game going. The problem is how much that content changes the game. New heroes or operators, in my opinion, are one of the worst ways to do this. It's a really weird problem. On the one hand, developers don't want the game to die, so they inject new life into it by adding new heroes and mechanics for players to learn to adapt to. Thumbs up. The problem becomes when 8 years later, the same game is still being injected with content, making it feel beaten for existing players and alienating to new ones. There is a way to do this well though, and I think Call of Duty, of all franchises to do something well for once, does this in an interesting way that holds player attention, lets designers have creative freedom, and do new and interesting things to the game without completely upending the sandbox. Aftermarket parts. Small note here, while recording this script was written a while ago. Aftermarket parts are kind of stupid now, and they kind of like jumped the shark a little bit with it. I still mean a lot of what I say in this section, but just know that it's not 100% the case anymore. Aftermarket parts, or I'll be referring to them as AMPs, were introduced in Modern Warfare 3 again. They're unlockable attachments that majorly or minorly change the way a gun plays without the need of adding an entire new weapon. The ones introduced into the game on release do this the best, and I think the best example of this, in my opinion, is the DG58 Nightshade rifle kit. It converts this big, clunky, kinda dogshit LMG into a uniquely designed submachine gun, and adds specific attachments and limits attachments so the gun truly does feel like another weapon entirely. It's pretty damn good, but it's not busted. Has decent enough stats that I can still use it and compete with whatever broken ass weapon they shut out and still have people screaming at me, what gun are you using? Some of these AMPs, however, have disrupted the sandbox, but almost in a good way. The full auto 60 round shotgun for the Haymaker was so much fun to use when it came out, as was the blunderbuss for the Moore sniper rifle. I still have a friend that almost uses that exclusively. The best part about these aftermarket parts is that they're always unlocked via weekly challenges and are totally free besides your mental sanity. 5 mundane, bland weekly challenges, but it's better than the new bundle that gets put into the shop every time a new weapon comes out. There are always going to be guns that are better than others, and this isn't a weapon balancing video. I know the static Superi STG and the new battle rifle are the best guns in the game. There will always be something that sticks out. Even in Modern Warfare 2019, a game that, looking back, actually had some decent enough weapon balancing, had the AMAX, the Uzi, the 725, the MP5, and the M4, but I could still drop in with my Bruin and do just fine. But the main reason that companies keep shoving content into a game is actually incredibly simple. Dollar bills! It's like I said before, there's nothing wrong with saturating your game with new content, but there's a sweet spot. Destiny 2 releasing 2 hours of story missions every week is too little, and COD dropping a new OP weapon every season is just too much. There are ways to do this that work, which is mainly cosmetic. I think the AMPs do a pretty good job of this for the most part. There are definitely ones that miss the mark, the laser gun BAL and some of the newest ones they've reduced for the LMGs, and even the newest, as of writing the script, explosive sniper seems to be more of a novelty than it tries to be an actual addition to the game. In the game's current sandbox, the gun feels slow, clunky, and inconsistent, even with attachments. There isn't anything inherently wrong with lol funny gun, but if you have the static in the game and nobody's using anything other than the meta or snipers, it won't matter if it's funny or not. It should still be usable. This still isn't a balancing video, but I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if you're going to be introducing more content, it needs to at least be enjoyable and usable in the game's current situation. This is where I think so many game companies hit their head so many times. They focus so much on putting things into the game and not as much on how these things are actually going to interact with the game's current existing sandbox or art style. I'll use the BAL laser kit as an example once again. Modern Warfare 3 is a near-future action shooter. I'm not expecting a hyper-realistic shooter game here, but Christ, the thing fits better in Destiny 2 than it does into COD. It literally already has a classification of weapon within Destiny that it slots into. This thing looks like I look over mid-Crota damage phase and see my teammate holding it. It just doesn't make any sense. Near future is the pinnacle time frame for a Call of Duty title. Think Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 3 the first time, and even Modern Warfare 2019 does this time frame well. Debatably, he's futuristic is a bit of a stretch, but my point stands. This overstuffing problem doesn't just show on post-launch. Just go look at how many camos are in Modern Warfare 2023. I'll just tell you, it's over 1,000, and 99% of them suck ass, except for this one. I love this one. Like I said before, a friend already covered the whole camo and cosmetic debacle. I'll link it, it's worth the watch. This is more of a design issue than a mechanic one, but oversaturating the amount of content in your game is bad, be it actual gameplay or cosmetic. More content just isn't always better. Dishonored is an old Xbox 360 stealth game that has some extended story through DLC, and that's it. There's no season passes, no extra schmuck littered in there. It's just a good story with good mechanics, with good visual style, and then it's done. Destiny 2 flooding its game with however many DLC passes or dungeon keys makes it suck to try and get into. For Honor's oversaturated hero pool and absurd amount of mechanics to try and learn. Even Overwatch with introducing new heroes. Like I mentioned before, this is a double-edged sword. Obviously, if the game doesn't do anything to retain players, then it'll die off and stop making money, something game companies don't want to happen. But players have been talking about how exhausted they are of this live service model, and constantly reminisce to the good old days of buying a fully completed game and being able to enjoy all of the content that came with their initial purchase. EA coming out and saying that players should get used to not owning their games, which is just fucking absurd. DLC has turned from a, hey, if you like some extra content, then for a lower price, you can have an additional piece of story and game content to enjoy, to, oh, you want to keep playing? $20, which in turn oversaturates the game with so much extra shit that it becomes an actual trudge. And sure, you don't need to spend the $20 on the super epic cool battle pass number 50, but it's constantly shoved down your throat to the point where you almost become actively punished for not doing so. Sure, I can earn the new OP battle rifle, or I can just cost up $20 and get access to both of the new guns. Overwatch used to have this problem, and then realized when they literally had people backing out of competitive games to buy the battle pass to get access to Mauga, locking the new power-crept hero behind a tier 50 and the free pass, or immediately to those who cough up the schmeckles. Problematic. For Honor heroes being unlocked immediately for $15 or costing 15,000 in-game currency that can take weeks to grind up, all while facing the new hero that feels busted while fighting, only to realize once you finally get them, people have learned and adapted, and then they feel like shit. It's not a rewarding way to extend your game's life. It just feels cheap and scummy to your players. So how do you keep players engaged? Having a mechanic that's your bread and butter, that's simple to understand but can be challenging to master. Look at games like Minecraft, who have been around for years and still have engaging enough mechanics to retain players. Crafting is intricate yet simple. The flow of the game makes progression feels natural and rewarding. This is how you keep players hooked without making it feel like a chore. Let's look at Dishonored again as an example. You start off with a simple knife, a short-range teleport, and a crossbow. As the game progresses, you unlock different ways to deal with enemies, including traps, guns, different bolts for the crossbow, and a hacking tool, as well as a myriad of other abilities like possession and summoning a swarm of rats to remove bodies you've killed. In fact, some areas of the game are only accessible with abilities unlocked later on, encouraging exploration and replayability. Different abilities aren't the only thing that you can use to spice up your gameplay though. You can find these whale bones that are hidden around the map that when equipped give you buffs towards certain aspects, but may hinder you in other ways. This is a video game trope I've always loved, as it makes the player think about what they want to do with their gameplay rather than just picking whatever does more damage or gives you more healing. Sure, there's one that does just give you a flat increase in damage, but it makes stealth extremely difficult, which is how you manage 90% of enemy encounters. The game's ending is also impacted by how many guards you kill and how stealthy you are. Full pacifist runs on Dishonored are very rewarding to pull off and require a lot of outside-the-box thinking and careful navigation to be able to do so successfully. This not only creates depth, but replayability to the missions to see all the different possible ways to navigate different situations. It doesn't always need to be a full-fledged game in order to convey this well. There's an infamous mission in Titanfall 2 where the player character jumps back and forth between the present and the past, opening doors and crossing chasms to get where they need to go. This mechanic is never brought back again, and the mission stands out as exceptional because of how well it's implemented. The obligatory water mission, vehicle mission, or plane mission, these bring a variety to games without upending everything. There's a reason they've become such a standard in games, despite mixed opinions on them. Breaking up gameplay for something new and interesting will break up potential monotony and give players something new to work with, without feeling like an entirely separate game. Another mission example that I think does this well is the mission Alone from Modern Warfare 2 the second time. It comes after a very large plot development and requires you to sneak through the town avoiding enemy guards. This mission is also, as far as I can remember, the only implementation of a crafting mechanic in a Call of Duty mission. While I'm usually opposed to random crafting, I think it fits this mission's design and purpose well. It isn't complicated, fits the whole commando vibe the mission is trying to give off, and the environment is interesting enough to actually make the players want to look around and naturally stumble across this stuff. It fits the tone well and doesn't try and do anything it doesn't need to. If your game's good, people are going to play it. There isn't a need for an 8-year 8 season pass update if the game stands on its own. Old game devs knew this. All you needed for DLC was an occasional map pack and some funny camos for $2 a pop and you were golden. No excessive changes to sandboxes, no learning a bunch of new things when the game goes on that winds up overcomplicating things. This is obviously when gaming was in a more simple state, pick 10 class system, straightforward unlocks, and simple cosmetics. As the industry developed, it has become more and more greedy. Ubisoft execs saying players need to get used to not owning their games before they become comfortable with a subscription-based model of selling, which is something that some games have A, already done, and B, proven to be unsuccessful and invoke negative reactions from players. When game studios have listened to players in the past, they receive what they wanted to begin with: money. Players will support games they enjoy. I have no shame in admitting that I own every single piece of Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 DLC content. It's a game I enjoy playing, and like I said before, I have no issue supporting games that I find enjoyable. The problem has become that supporting these games through, quote, microtransactions is mandatory, not optional, and the enticement for doing so has loomed more into exclusivity and FOMO rather than actual content. Is this a cycle I think is going to change soon? Absolutely not. But I think more and more companies are realizing good things happen when they give players what they want. The recent Helldivers controversy is a great example of this. Again, recent in the sense of when this script was written, not recorded. I'm recording this in February. I have no idea when this was written, but it was a while ago. This has been done in past, and Helldivers is actually a pretty good game right now. Players didn't like the severity of balancing changes and wanted to be able to enjoy that power fantasy, so Arrowhead came in and said, okay, we hear you. Armor enemies are nerfed and flame-based weapons are up, go crazy. This is something that I wish Destiny 2 would take more to heart. There's nothing wrong with balancing something that's broken, but at the end of the day, if it makes the game too easy, don't use it. No one is forcing Warlock players to use Well of Radiance, and no one's forcing Hunters to use Nighthawk and Still Hunt, but we are because it's fun. And nobody is making Titans play Titan. This still isn't a balance focused video, but to tie this section back to my main point, even large balancing patches can feel like a game losing its identity. Needing to read the patch notes every week is something that players simply don't want to do. I will admit I do look forward to reading the TWID, which is the devlog for Destiny 2 every Thursday, and I do look forward to seeing balance changes, but not for the reason other players do. Something Bungie has been doing a decent job of is keeping old things fresh by bringing them up to the levels of new stuff. The Light 3.0 changes are a great example of this, bringing new things into the old subclasses but making them perform just as well as the newer ones. Now you might be saying, but that's just injecting new content and changing things players already know. Is it this whole 10 page plus long script about saying how you don't like that? True. But it isn't about changing it at a foundational level. Solar is about making things go boom, but now it's also about ability uptime and healing for more effective boom making. Reprising old exotics is something they've started to play with as well. The new season is reworking a hunter exotic to have new synergies with new supers, and is making a shitty exotic ever so slightly better by giving it all the other exotics old traits. Will I be using Blight Ranger? Fuck no, that shit's ass. Will I be using Raju's Harness? Fuck yeah, I love Gathering Storm. I actually have been using Raju's Harness a bunch, and it's a ton of fun. Reprisal is not changing in a negative way. What would be bad is introducing an entire new exotic armor piece and giving it the reprised abilities they're giving to Raju's and just leaving it and Blight Ranger in the dust. Long-lived games have the struggle of trying to maintain identity while needing to be creative for years and years. This isn't just a problem for games like Destiny 2, but franchises like Call of Duty. It gets to a point where there's only so much innovation that can be done within a certain set of parameters, but that doesn't mean that there isn't any hope. I know there's the hire fans joke that goes on, but seriously listen to your fan base. Nobody spends as much time playing your game as your players themselves. If your player base says, hey, we don't like this thing, please stop making it, and then next launch you come out with, we heard you guys, there's less of this thing, makes players excited for the next game. This still doesn't need to be in entirely new releases though. This also applies for updates and patch notes. But if players have been screaming, oh my god, please get rid of this thing, and you say, this is the next release, $70 please, and never actually look at and address that thing, players are going to not be happy and won't spend any money on your game. TLDR, please God, just listen to the players who play your game. So this is my first video tackling a pretty big topic. I want to make a lot more of these, but this one took me a long time to get out, and some of the stuff I say in this is kind of dated. I do address that when that comes up, or did address it rather. I'm recording this immediately after recording everything. But I really enjoyed making this. It was a ton of fun, and I got a lot of inspiration from a lot of people online and just in general, as well as a lot of my friends who are overtaking the same project that I am. I stream relatively infrequently on Twitch if you want to come and check that out. I'm going to try and do that more regularly, hopefully maybe 3 days a week. There's a lot of stuff going on with school and working and all that other stuff, but I'm going to try and find time to enjoy and make more content, because that's what I enjoy doing. But thank you so much, you guys, for clicking on it. It means a lot to me, and I'll link my friend's channel in the description. He really inspired me to make this video. He does a lot of good work on a lot of similar topics. But all in all, hopefully the next one doesn't take me as long to get out, and I've got a lot more recording to do. So Godspeed, thanks for watching, and yeah. $1 bills!